Start the recording. So good morning, everyone, or good
Morning.
afternoon, good night, good evening. Welcome to District 5000. Uh, it's a great pleasure to introduce Ray Matsumiya, who is the current president of the We Rotary Club. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge our district governor is here. Uh, Sandy Matsui, please give everyone a wave.
Aloha, everyone. Great to see you and great to be here.
Yeah, and our immediate past district governor, Naomi Masuno, is actually the host of this meeting, and she is my main collaborator in the Peace Builder Committee at District 5000. Uh, Naomi, say a few words. Say hi to everyone.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you for being here. We've got people from all over the world with us. And Ray, thank you for your leadership with the We Rotary and the International Peace Group that you have, and for sharing this information. And we're recording this. We'll get this recording out on our district website as well. Because Ira, you're right. People need to know. We need to get the word out. And this is a really good way to start with that information. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Naomi.
Great. So we're on a tight schedule, but just briefly, let me introduce uh, the members of the We Rotary Club that I recognize. Ray Matsumiya is the current president. Ira Helfand is a well-known peace activist, also a member of the We Rotary Club. Welcome, Ira.
Thank you.
And Ann Fritsch is a board member of the Rotary Action Group for Peace, and she is the chair of the subcommittee on the elimination of nuclear weapons. So welcome, Ann. And let's see, who else is here from the We Rotary Club? I thought I saw one more person. William. Yeah.
Yes,
Hi. Thanks for coming.
thank
Where
you.
are you, Bill?
In Ohio,
Ohio. Okay.
yes.
And Peter.
I'm Peter Metz. I'm probably the newest member of We Rotary. Well, not quite.
I think I am.
No, Bill, you and I came in at the same time. So anyway, I'm in Needham, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston.
Okay. I think, and Steve Yoshida is coming on right now, I think. Uh, and I'd also like to recognize Richard Denton, who is the district governor elect for District 7010, also a peace activist and also an activist for Indigenous people in Canada. So welcome, Richard. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, so let's get started. I'll turn it over to Ray, and Ray can do more introductions if he likes, or just dive right in.
Mark, can I interrupt a minute? I got a message from Helen saying she's waiting to come in to the meeting.
Oh, I'll watch for her.
For some odd reason, I'm getting messages on admitting people, but I'm going to not do that.
I'll take care of that. Go ahead, Ray.
But I don't see anybody in the waiting room.
I don't see anybody there now.
Is Helen in?
No.
Helen's still not back.
Should we just start, or should we wait for a minute?
You might be in the wrong waiting room.
Well, I guess maybe we should just get started. Would that be okay, Mark?
Yeah, go ahead, Ray, because I'll watch for Helen and we'll let her in.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mark, for introducing us. It's really a great pleasure for us to be here today. As Mark said, I'm the current president of the We Rotary Club for International Peace. And I'm also the director of something called the Oleander Initiative in Boston. And what we do is we bring people from all over the world to Hiroshima, Japan for really life-changing workshops and experiences. So we're here to talk about two things that our club members care a lot about. The first is the unbelievable dangers of nuclear weapons and how the potential of these weapons has the ability to end life on Earth. We're also going to talk about really kind of like this unprecedented time in history where us as Rotarians have an opportunity to help abolish these crazy weapons. And it's really an amazing time. I'm very lucky to be joined with some really esteemed colleagues. I'm here with Ira, who is the former past president of the Nobel Peace Prize winning organization, Physicians for Social Responsibility. Professor Ann Frisch, a Rotary Peace Champion. Kat Haber, and she is one of the founders of this club. And she's also a prominent climate change activist. And of course, Helen Peacock, who is the Peace Chair of the Rotary Club of Collingwood. I feel that sometimes when we talk about nuclear weapons, we use the language of statistics and treaties and resolutions and the wording for these things. But I feel like really the heart of the reason why we're here is because of the impact of these weapons on human beings. And to illustrate that, I really want to introduce you to someone that is really special to me. And that person is my grandfather. This is my grandfather. His name is Yoshio Chichioka. And on August 6th, 1945, he lived in a village outside of Hiroshima called Hiro. And on that morning, people started calling his house and coming to his house, saying that something horrific had happened in Hiroshima. But no one could quite explain what that was. My grandfather knew that he had to go because he was the captain of the fire department in his town. So he gathered his men, he got in his fire truck, and he started going on the road to Hiroshima. You can see there's a 37-minute drive on the main highway from Hiro to Hiroshima. And I always wonder what he thought during those 37 minutes as he approached Hiroshima on August 6th. Because he must have seen the mushroom cloud still in the air. He must have smelled the smell of a burning city. He must have heard the cries and wails of the victims as they came out of the city, escaping the fire from the bomb. I wonder if he thought about the train station that he would arrive at frequently to go to work in Hiroshima. I wonder if he thought about his favorite streets where all his favorite restaurants were. I wonder if he thought about the Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall, which is known as the Pearl of Hiroshima, that just dominated the landscape there. I wonder if he thought about his family and his friends and the family of his friends that lived in the center of Hiroshima. When he arrived in a hell. The bomb had destroyed 90% of the buildings in Hiroshima. I mean, think of where you live and think of 90% of all the buildings that are being destroyed. This is right near the train station. This is the Industrial Promotion Hall. This is Hiroshima just 1 year before, in 1944. You can see how densely packed it was. It was such a lively, bustling city. It was framed by 3 beautiful rivers. This is Hiroshima after the bomb. I think this poem captures some of the horror of that day and what happened. Hiroshima, nothing, nothing. Old and young, burned to death. City blown away. A socket without an eyeball. White bones scattered over reddish rubble. Above, sun burning down. City of ruins, still as death. Because what had happened was a weapon that had never been used before in history was unleashed on the tiny, frail, flesh and blood human beings of Hiroshima. This bomb basically harnessed the very bonds of the universe. And the hypocenter of this bomb reached 6,000 degrees, which is about the same temperature as the surface of the sun. It twisted metal and melted glass. In one bank, most of the coins fused together from the heat. And it almost had a supernatural impact on human beings. People that are caught in the flash were vaporized, and their shadows were left on stairs and walls. If you were wearing dark clothing, that pattern absorbed the flash of the atomic bomb, and that pattern was branded onto your skin. By the end of 1945, over 140,000 people were killed by this bomb, which is more than 1/3 of the population of Hiroshima at that time. And this is less well known, but there were over 6,500 orphans. That means that each one of these kids, their mother, their father, their aunts, their uncles, their cousins, everyone was killed, and no one could take care of them. Hiroshima became the city of orphans. Over 650,000 people were impacted one way or the other by the bomb. And really, one of the horrors of nuclear weapons is that it's a weapon that keeps having an impact even after it explodes. So there's so many people that got leukemia, tumors, terrible cancers that plagued people for years and years afterwards, some even today. Going back to my grandfather, I just can't imagine what he saw or what he felt during those 2 days he was a first responder in Hiroshima. And he didn't talk that much about what happened. I think he kept a lot of stuff in. I think it's really too much to handle. My mom remembers being scared as a little girl because her big, strong father, this really gregarious, happy guy, who she saw as so strong, she could hear crying late at night sometimes in her bedroom. And over the years, like little trickles of horror would come out. And one of the stories he talked about was how he looked over the river and he just saw scores and scores of dead bodies in the river that were burned. And he said that he was so surprised because he expected them to be black, but they were actually white, that they looked like boiled meat. And the smell of this must have been horrific. I don't think it's a coincidence that he really avoided pork and a lot of meats after his experience. Until the day he died, my grandfather talked about the lessons of Hiroshima, or what can be learned from this horrible tragedy. The first was that there should never be another Hiroshima again. He believed he saw the end of the world in his city, and he's correct. If there are many Hiroshimas in World War III, the entire world will end. And Ira will talk about that after me. And the second was that it was my responsibility, your responsibility, it was every single person on this earth's responsibility to work for peace so another Hiroshima would not happen. And that's why we're here today, is that we have an unprecedented chance as Rotary to really make a difference, to make sure what happened 76 years ago to my grandfather never ever happens ever again on our planet. So to illustrate some of those dangers, I'm going to pass on this presentation to Ira Helfand. Ira, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Ray, and thank you for that amazing presentation. I've heard Ray speak before about the experiences of his grandfather at Hiroshima, and I think it's the most powerful and eloquent testimony I've ever heard, aside from a few actual Hibakusha recounting their personal experience about what happened at Hiroshima, what happened at Nagasaki. And the experience there is just an incredibly powerful warning to us of what these weapons are capable of. But as Ray suggested, the horror, if weapons are used again, is going to be orders of magnitude greater. And one of the things that we really need to understand about Hiroshima and Nagasaki is that they do not begin to prepare us for the devastation that will result if these weapons are used again. Because if there is a war between nuclear armed states, it will not be one or two Hiroshima-sized bombs on one or two cities. It's going to be many bombs, each of them many times larger than the Hiroshima bomb, on many cities. And the destruction will be proportionately greater. Let me talk for just a couple of minutes about what a limited nuclear war might look like. We've been concerned in the last few years, not just with the problem of the US-Russian large-scale nuclear war, but what happens if a smaller war breaks out. And the model that we've looked at consistently is the case of India and Pakistan, which between them have at this point about 300 nuclear warheads, and their arsenals are growing rapidly. But this is a tiny fraction of the 14,000 nuclear warheads in the world today. And most of the Indian and Pakistani weapons are much smaller than the weapons held by the Russians and the US and the Chinese. Even so, a limited war in South Asia involving less than 1% of the world's nuclear arsenals would be an utter catastrophe, not just for South Asia, but for the entire planet. As a direct effect of the explosions and the fires that these weapons would cause, something in the order of 75 to 100 million people would die in the first week. But that local destruction, as unimaginably horrible as it is only part of the story, because these weapons would cause more than 100 cities to burn. And the smoke from those burning cities would rise into the upper atmosphere and block out the sunlight, not just over India and Pakistan, but it would be dispersed over the entire planet within a matter of 2 or 3 days, causing temperatures across the planet to drop and resulting in massive climate disruption over the following decade. As a result of that climate disruption, crops would fail everywhere. And the best estimate that we have had in the past is that upwards of 2 billion people would be at risk of starvation as a result of this war in South Asia. People, again, not just in South Asia, but in Latin America, in Africa, in North America, in Europe, in China, in Russia. The death of 2 billion people, were that to happen, would not be the extinction of our species, but it would mean the end of civilization as we know it. We would be back in the darkest part of the Dark Ages. No civilization in history has ever withstood a shock of this magnitude, and there's no reason to believe that our very complex, fragile economic system, on which we all depend, there's no reason to believe that it would be able to survive a disruption on this scale. That's a limited nuclear war. If the United States and Russia get into a war, things will be even worse. A study that we did back in 2002 showed that if just 300 of the large warheads in the Russian arsenal got through to cities in the United States, they would kill about 100 million people here in the US. And the US counterattack would kill a similar number of people in Russia. And if NATO were involved in the conflict, similar numbers of people in Canada and Europe would also die in the first afternoon, maybe 300 million people altogether. But again, it is the climate effects that are most horrifying. A war between the United States and Russia would put about 30 times as much soot into the upper atmosphere as a war between India and Pakistan. Temperatures across the entire planet would drop an average of 14 degrees Fahrenheit. In the interior regions of North America and Eurasia, the temperatures would drop 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We have not seen conditions on this earth like this since the coldest moment of the last ice age 18,000 years ago. And under these conditions, all the ecosystems which have evolved since the last naturally occurring ice age would collapse. Food production would stop, and under these conditions, it is very possible that our species would become extinct. What is most important, I think, for us to understand is that we are not just talking about a horrible thing that happened 70 years ago at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We're not talking about the fantasies of some screenwriter for a grade B movie. We are talking about a real and present danger Every day that we allow these weapons to continue to exist, this is the threat we are living under. And the experts tell us that the danger of nuclear war is growing and that it is greater today than it has ever been. William Perry, the former Secretary of Defense under Bill Clinton, has said that it is more likely that we will have a nuclear war today than it was at any moment during the Cold War. And the panel of experts at the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists concur with that. They have set the Bulletin's iconic doomsday clock to 100 seconds to midnight, the closest it has ever been to nuclear Armageddon. And despite these warnings, despite the fact that we know we have come within minutes of nuclear war on at least 6 occasions during the nuclear weapons era, we as a culture, as a society, are not addressing this problem. In the 1980s, if you ask people what the major problems in the world are today, number 1 or number 2 on everyone's list was preventing nuclear war. If you pose that same question today, preventing nuclear war doesn't appear on anybody's list. And that has to change. And that's where Rotary can come in. This is not a situation that is beyond our control. When I describe these horrible things that are going to happen, it is important for us to understand this is going to happen if we continue down the road that we're on. But it's equally important to understand that this is not the future that must be. Nuclear weapons are not a force of nature. It is not as though an asteroid is coming at the planet and there's nothing we can do about it. These are little machines. For the most part, they're about the size of the chair that I'm sitting in. We have put these together with our own hands and we know how to take them apart. We have already dismantled more than 50,000 nuclear warheads. We just need to summon the will to dismantle the remaining 14,000. And when I speak to most people, one of the major concerns that I have to address is their feeling of isolation. People say to them, you know, this is a big problem. What can I as one person do about this? We in Rotary are not in that situation. We belong to a family with 1.2 million members in almost every country on the planet. And if we are able to mobilize our brothers and sisters in Rotary, we can have a profound impact on the current situation. I think it is totally possible for us to eliminate these weapons and to do it within a decade. And I think that Rotary is the key to this. If Rotary stands up and brings to this question the same dedication, the same passion, the same sense of urgency and commitment that we brought to the fight to eradicate polio, we can eliminate nuclear weapons as well. And, you know, we have all joined Rotary because we want to do something good with our lives. We want to put service above self. We are in a position today to save the world. And there is absolutely nothing better that any of us could ever do, and nothing that is more fully in keeping with the mission and purpose of Rotary. So I hope that we will all figure out how best to take advantage of this privileged position that we're in and use the influence that we can generate to bring about the elimination of these weapons. And I'm going to turn the floor over now to Helen Peacock, who's going to talk to us about some of the ways that Rotary can take action.
I think Kat was coming next.
Sorry, my bad.
Actually, I don't see Kat here, so I think it's okay to just go on to on Helen.
Okay. She was here a minute ago, but not now. Okay. Hi, everyone. I've been kicked off twice, so fingers crossed I can stay on. I'm just going to screen share. So picking up where Ira left off, this sense of what's possible for us as Rotarians. And I have come to believe that we actually could be the tipping point in terms of shifting our planet toward peace. And that we could be doing that through endorsing the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. But when you mention this to Rotarians, typical Rotarians in clubs around the world, the first reaction is a variation on the but. Everybody knows Rotary can't get involved politically. Doesn't everybody know that? Everybody knows that. And we know for a fact that a resolution last year, and I'm assuming everybody is familiar with the resolution process, asking the board to consider endorsing the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was rejected by almost 3-1. And we know that the major reason in which the representatives to the council rejected the resolution was they looked at it, They spent 2 minutes on it. It seemed political to them. And so they said no. But if we stop and we think about it, it's really not so much that Rotary can't get involved politically. How did we manage to eliminate polio from the planet? All of the strategies that we used to do that were political. We coordinated campaigns with neighboring countries for vaccinations. How do you coordinate campaigns with neighboring countries without being political? We got education programs put in place to dispel the myth about polio, and we got government support for them. How do you do that without being political? And in countries in Africa, and we learned this in Rotary magazine of February of this year, individual Rotarians in various countries in Africa advocated directly with government officials in their country for the eradication of polio to be a priority. It wasn't a priority, surprise, surprise. So they advocated directly using their personal cachet with government officials to make it a priority. Now that is the very definition of political. So it's not that Rotary can't get involved politically. If we think about it, what we're really saying is Rotary can't be partisan. We can't be favoring this party over that party or this country over that party. But we can certainly be brilliantly and effectively political. We did it once, as Ira said, in eliminating polio around the world, and we can do it again. So this very distinction, this thoughtful distinction is what kind of makes the Rotary culture shift possible. And we can shift to a place where we not only commit ourselves to building positive peace around the world, we take a really strong stand in terms of eliminating war, and specifically in terms of supporting the treaty for the endorsement for the elimination of the TPNW. And I want to just take you back for a moment to how this all started. Very briefly, there was a presentation given at the end of April of this year to the Rotary Club of Collingwood, South Georgian Bay. That's my home club, as you know. And the idea was floated for the first time at a local Rotary club that we take on endorsing the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And who knew how it was going to be received? But in fact, the 44 Rotarians who were at that meeting, and this is ground zero for the resolution for this year, they were incredibly enthusiastic. And literally within days, a resolution was written, because there was no resolution at that point. Within days, the resolution was written and endorsed 100% by the executive of the club, and then approved by the members of the club. And now we had a resolution to rally behind, should we choose to rally behind it. Now, I should mention that we also had 2 special guests at that presentation, 42 Canadians from associated with the Rotary Club of Collingwood, plus Anne Frisch and Richard Denton. And what happened is, not only did we create the resolution and endorse it, but we reached out in Canada and around the world to our other contacts, and each new presentation, asking them to look at the resolution and asking them to think about it. And each new presentation led to another presentation and another presentation and another presentation, because this was speaking to what Rotarians really want to do. They want to show up more strongly for peace. And by now, you know, we really didn't get started until maybe the middle of May. And June 30th was the deadline for getting a resolution endorsed and submitted to the Council on Resolutions. And somehow in those 6 weeks, we were able to have 3 districts endorse the resolution, 1 in Australia and 2 in Canada. So now we had a guarantee that the resolution was going to go to the Council on Resolutions. And we had hundreds of conversations that had been started in clubs all around the world, within the club and between the club and their district executive. So the conversation had started and the movement was growing and the enthusiasm was growing. And this doesn't happen by accident. Again, I say this happens to Rotarians' desire to stand up more strongly for peace, to show up more strongly on the world stage and make a difference in terms of peace. So our movement is growing, and right up to the very end, advocacy is happening. And a small group of Rotarians actually sat down and did the laborious job of figuring out, going through all of the districts in Rotary, all 535 of them, and trying to find a website or an email address, and then emailing out information about the nuclear summit their first email with our president, Czech Armetta, which hopefully you've all went to. And I think, Ira, you were part of this small group. And then the second email went out immediately after the summit with quotes from our president of what he said at the summit, and with a request for support of the resolution. By now, the resolution was named. So we were continuing our education campaign. And we Rotary Club did the first ever Rotary briefing. We called it a briefing, which was very well received, had a number of presentations, including Ray's very poignant personal story, and a video was produced and circulated widely. And then right up until the very end, voting ended on October 15th, right up to the very end, this advocacy was going on. And this one, the idea, between idea and execution was only 4 days. So in 4 days, a conference was organized that had over 200 Rotarians present. And again, a video was made and posted on Facebook. So our advocacy for this was continuing right literally until the last moment. Now, in the meantime, Rotary culture back in Rotary for Rotary International staff was still very much in the Rotary can't get involved politically. And none of us thought, as we were advocating with our fellow Rotarians about this, none of us thought that we should be approaching directly. We didn't think of the need to approach Rotary International staff to talk about this. And so what happened was staff objected to the education campaign to the district governors, and we were told to stop, and the recipients were told to ignore the emails that our group had sent out. And remember, these were just emails about the summit and information about what our president had said. And when our representatives went to vote on our resolution, they received a warning. The first comment they saw was a warning from Rotary International staff with a criticism of the unauthorized emails of support that had been sent out and requesting that they ignore them. And the thing is that they hadn't received any emails. Nothing had been sent to representatives. We didn't even know who they were. These emails had gone to district governors. And so they're being asked to ignore emails they never received that were supportive to the resolution. The third thing that happened is that a statement was inserted saying currently Rotary does not have the knowledge or the expertise to speak on this. And we know that that's just patently not true, that in fact, there's dozens of Rotarians who are very knowledgeable about this. And we even have several Nobel Peace Prize winners. So we definitely do have the expertise. And then several positive comments by our reps were not published. They weren't permitted to go through because they contained links to the internet. Now, links had been permitted before, but they weren't going to be permitted this time. Our reps did not know that. And the entire comment was eliminated, not just a link, which meant that our reps, that the representatives to CORE did not have a chance to think about the distinction between political and nonpartisan. And they did not have a chance to learn about the new Rotary International Investment Policy, which included divesting from nuclear weapons. And we saw these as two very powerful arguments in support of our resolution that unfortunately the 500 district reps didn't get to see. So bottom line on all this is not that there's a right or a wrong or a good and bad at all. Rotary staff were doing their job with positive intentions according to their understanding and their sense of Rotary culture. And we saw educating Rotarians as critical to make an informed decision. So we were doing the best we could with regard to educating. But it was seen as inappropriate outside the CORE process and quote, political. And regardless of how this came to happen, the cumulative impact of these actions were significant. The negative tone was set at the beginning for our reps to look at the resolution. There was that misleading statement in there. On the one hand, we're saying we can do this, and then the statement at the end says we don't have the knowledge to do it. Our reps were not able to learn the comments made by our president, and they were not able to think for themselves about the political versus partisan argument. And they didn't find out about Rotary's new investment strategy, which included eliminating nuclear weapons. So there was a cumulative impact of these, however well-intentioned actions happened on the part of Rotary International staff. As we all know, though, the end result was incredible. We were still able to improve the percentage of districts supporting the resolution by 50% over the year before. And we kind of think that had there been none of these other actions, we may well have achieved the 50% that we were going for. So we really moved the dial. And again, I say that speaks to Rotarians' desire in their core to show up in a bigger way for peace. So how do we maintain this momentum that we've already started? Well, first, we have to figure out a way of getting the culture in Rotary International to staff to catch up to the culture in which we are now evolving, one in which we are engaged in supporting and endorsing the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons using, quote, political strategies, but in a completely nonpartisan way, exactly as is being done by the International Red Cross, as an example. And there are many ways that we can be kind of connecting with Rotary International staff and doing this outreach to staff. We can do it through another petition. We can do it through letters of support. There are various ways in which we can be reaching out to them and playing catch up in terms of the culture that's evolving within Rotary grassroots. So we want to do that for sure and see that happen. We also need and maybe those efforts, I should say, maybe those efforts might lead to Rotary International actually endorsing the treaty this year, which would be awesome. And that would be absolutely awesome. And if they do, great. And if they don't, we need another club to take on the lead club and lead district endorsement of the resolution. And I personally would love to recommend that we, Rotary International, take that role if it's needed. I know that the Rotary Club of Collingwood, South Georgian Bay is happy to pass on the baton. So we need to get another resolution out there right away and work for endorsement. And this time, let's get 20 clubs to endorse it. This year, we had 3 clubs endorse it. The first year, we had 1 club endorse it. Let's get 20 clubs to endorse it, and maybe even 200. I mean, don't forget, 214 districts voted in favor of the resolution. So we have the opportunity of having a lot of districts endorsing it. And I personally feel, and I think you all do too, that it's absolutely inevitable, if we can maintain this momentum, that we will have the resolution, that the resolution will pass. But it's not just passing the resolution that we want. We want Rotary International to endorse the resolution. And to do that, we want them to be as informed and educated as we have been trying to do with Rotary members at the grassroots level. So we need to reach out to the members of the board at Rotary International and engage them on this topic and talk to them about this. Now, maybe miraculously, that could still happen this year through some of our efforts down here. Awesome. And if not, this is what I would see unfolding. But that's still not enough. There's still more that we can be doing. We don't need to be waiting for Rotary International to endorse the resolution. We can start working right now, advocating on behalf of the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, wherever we live, wherever we are locally. And there are already fantastic strategies that have been put together by ICANN for doing this. The ICANN Cities Appeal gives you all of the information you need to work for your city or your town to endorse the treaty. And these local endorsements may seem symbolic, but they really add up over in the end. And if I look to Canada as an example, at this point, most of our major cities have endorsed the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. From Halifax to Montreal to Toronto to Winnipeg to Vancouver to Victoria, they've all endorsed the treaty. And we have over 200 parliamentarians. We've used the ICANN parliamentary appeal process, and we have over 200 of our parliamentarians who have also endorsed the treaty and said that if elected, they will work for Canada to endorse the treaty. So we can be doing that kind of work right now. We do not need to wait for Rotary International to endorse the treaty for us to start going locally and do that. Because of course, what we're going for is as many countries as possible to endorse the treaty, making it absolutely compelling for the nuclear powered countries to sit down and hammer out an agreement for disarmament. So that's what I see happening. I think it's very exciting, and it takes me back to the question asked at the beginning: can we Rotarians be a tipping point? And the answer that we've heard so far in the ones that we have been speaking to in terms of endorsing this treaty and standing up for peace is yes, 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 yes. And if I could borrow a phrase from Barack Obama, yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Amazing presentation. I want to move on to our second to last speaker, and that is Anne Frisch. So the floor is yours, Anne.
Thank you very much. I want to also comment before I begin my story that we understand that the Latin Americans were so fired up about this resolution. We were told that all the Zone 25 representatives voted yes on this, and the thinking was that all of the Brazil districts would have voted yes on this. So Mexico is one of the first ratifiers of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And Mexico has signed. So these people are aware of what's going on in that part of the world. So let me begin by saying that I'm here in Minnesota celebrating that today Rotary nuclear war was not launched, nor there were any mistake or miscalculation leaving us to be consumed in a half hour because of automated responses over which we have no control. So for the moment, we're all okay. There's probably no group in the world more sensitive to the words incoming missiles than the people who are in this meeting right now. So we're aware of how impactful that can be. So what we have to say is that Ira's talking about being on the path to nuclear catastrophe. It is not the path we have to be on. Nuclear weapons and their automated systems, whatever we believe, they do not care what we believe. They operate as planned. They are useless, antiquated, expensive, and will make whatever humanitarian efforts we have made in our lives fall into oblivion. Everything that we've ever done or could do would be gone in a moment. But that's not the path we must be on. And we have to recognize that that is not the path that Rotary is on right now. Rotary Foundation has determined that nuclear weapons violate the Rotary purpose and therefore will not invest in them. It was a bold and courageous move, but like the admission of women into Rotary, it was necessary to bring into compliance our values and our mission. So while it's controversial, but there are also still all men's Rotary clubs in Rotary, the environmental sustainability of the planet must be secured by nuclear weapons as we move along the path to removal of carbon, harmful refrigerants, adoption of a plant-rich diet, and the protection of our companions on the planet, the rights of nature. Rotary is already on this. So earlier this month, Rotary International President and nominee Gordon McAnally spoke at the Rotary Club of Madras. Questioned by me about his perception of the new socially responsible investment plan, he said, yes, and we should all be doing that. Later this month, he told one of our members in India, when she questioned him, that to move toward nuclear abolition in Rotary, quote, we have to lobby. Yes, he said that. Tucker Mehta has said regarding action toward nuclear weapons abolition, we have to do advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. That's what we had to do for polio. So we are beyond this political thing in some sense. So we must do more than ask others to act. And so what I have done is picked on Gordon McAnally's enthusiasm for everyone divesting and making it a program in Rotary. So it's really beyond our usual assistance to others, and we must keep doing that. But if we're planting a garden, we think inch by inch, row by row, we got to make my garden grow. So we think of how we can transform our Rotarian lives into the image of what we want the world to look like. And right now, we start to look at how we invest in the world. Would we ever say, I want to buy some nuclear weapons stocks right now? No. They creep up on us. Lockheed, Boeing. We don't see the catastrophe in this. Capital One, yikes, that's my credit card. So as we deal with our financial advisors, if we have one, or we just do this on our own, we just get rid of this stuff. And we have help from Green America. I put the link in the chat, and Hawa Profiteering that lists all the egregious investors who have credit cards and investment cards. So here's my vision. Imagine that we have a map of all the Rotarians on the planet. Every person has their little unique place, as we actually do. So it has a light that can be turned on. So here's what I think we can do. Just as Rotary has taken the step of getting out of the nuclear weapons business, that is exactly what the countries that have ratified the treaty on the prohibition are now doing. They are getting out of the nuclear weapons business, not only by assisting in any way, by transporting, storing, making the parts or fluids to it. They have committed to getting out of it. It's not that they're being forced to do it. They're ready to do this. They are doing this. So we can also, in our microcosmic kind of way, which on a map of little lights could be really measured and assessed. So first, because it really is a small step and not terribly time consuming, we people, we Rotarians, we divest. We read Perilous Profiteering. We check our credit card. We look at our investments, and we see what we can do quickly. We find the Green America website and see what credit cards are green, and we make a strategy for transition. We would never invest in our own destruction. So when we do that, we turn the light on the map in our little place in the planet. We can also do the same, just as we ask people to help us. We all have our campaigns and our projects and our strategy. We just ask people to do one thing for us. And for us, it's divest from nuclear weapons. We can do the same for climate activists because we all care about the warming of the planet. We can, if we need a new refrigerator, we can get a planet-friendly appliance. We can cut back on heat. We can insulate our houses. We can, again, turn the light to blink. And doing these simple things, one by one, inch by inch, we save our planet as we ask the big players to do this as well. Then we move toward a plant-rich diet, which actually is one of the best ways to save the planet. The best ways to reduce global warming is to get rid of animal agriculture. Voila, turn the light green. If nothing else, we must do everything we can to get our money out of nuclear weapons. Our cooperation with this impending devastation. Nuclear catastrophe does not have to happen. So we ask ourselves, what is our planet calling us to do to save others and our only home? We can do it when we become the solution. Then we reach out to ask others. Let us embrace the call to get rid of nuclear weapons in big and small ways, inches, rows, and together we can make our future happen.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Our last speaker is a person where he's really responsible for all this. He's the founder of our club. It's Steve Yoshida. He's gonna have some final words at the end of our presentation. So Steve, the floor is yours. I know that Steve is having some tech troubles, so hopefully he'll be able to get on. Just saw him. Oh, it looks like Steve's having trouble getting on. If he can come back, we'll go to him. I guess I would like to just conclude by recapping some of the things that our members have said that where you can get involved, what things specifically that you can do to help this future without nuclear weapons. I understand that there may be some people that are not Rotarians as part of this audience. So if you're not, please consider joining We Rotary. We've had almost a 50% increase in our membership this year, and we want to keep that momentum going. Steve was going to talk about something called the Hawa Project. And it's this really beautiful project where you take the seeds of survivor trees in Hiroshima and you plant them in different parts of the world as symbols of peace. And you can also sign Hibakusha's Survivor's Appeal. And this is something that Anne heads up. And maybe Anne, you can briefly describe what this is.
Yes. Okay, I'd love to. First of all, I'm so proud that our club, We Rotary of International Peace, can put on a forum like this that has a global reach. But we're also part of the Hawaii district. And I'm also pleased as well that we have so many peace projects going on in our district. Everyone of the district, you've got the big picture from our panel of experts. I'd like to talk a little bit about the little picture, how you can take first steps. And as Ray mentioned, you might want to start with growing a survivor tree from seeds and using it as an educational tool for your schools, or having exchanges and sending your young people to Hiroshima. Anyway, if you're interested in projects like that, please give me a call or contact me and we can talk some more. Thank you, Ray.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Just to conclude on other things you can do is, Helen explained the vote that's coming up next year. And, we would like to have people, especially higher up in Rotary, to help us with the strategy and the connection to really influence this vote next year. For all you club members, please contact us for our speakers bureau. We have an amazing stable of speakers, not just the people you heard today, but many other professors and other people that have spoken at our club that we have access to. So if you want your own club members to have more knowledge about nuclear weapons and the dangers of it, then please contact us. We'll hook you up with the right speaker. We have a few club members that have published pieces in different publications around the world. I was published in USA Today. Peter, one of our club members, was recently, Peter and Ira co-published something in the Boston Globe recently. So we'll love to help you with that as well. All this publicity is really helpful. And lastly, like one of the things we're really focusing on is really passing the endorsement of the TPNW in next year's COR. So, this is going to depend on a lot of grassroots efforts. So please get your club energized, get your club members energized, and make sure it gets to your Rotary District representative or the people that vote for the COR to really make a difference next year. So that's the end of our official presentation. And I'm not sure how much time we have, but we'd love to have a Q&A if you have questions.
Ray, can I add two quick things?
Oh, please.
Could ask people to do. We do hope that this resolution will pass the COR next year if it needs to, but the resolution has also been introduced directly to the Board of Directors of Rotary, or rather will be a week from Monday or Tuesday, by the E-Club of World Peace. They are petitioning directly to the Board of Directors to support this resolution and to endorse and support the TPNW. And if any club would like to support that effort, I put in the chat the email address for Rudy Westerveld, who is coordinating this. If you have your club president contact Rudy, he will add your club's name to the list of clubs that are supporting this effort. It is possible that we can get the Rotary Board to adopt the resolution that we've been working for now, before the end of the year when they have their next meeting. And so we really would like to make a big push to get people to support that. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was in regards to helping to support work outside of Rotary, reaching out to your community for people who are from the United States. In the US, we have formed a campaign called Back from the Brink to support the TPNW and to bring about the fundamental change in US nuclear policy needed. And I put the web address for that campaign in the chat as well.
Thank you, Ira.
There is a question from Kelly McDonald on the chat. If we have time to address that.
Yeah, does everybody see that?
Is Kelly there? Maybe she could speak her question.
Kelly, why don't you ask the question? Are you still here?
I am. So I guess my question, is, there's a very compelling and great story, but I don't think I'm sort of new to the arc of kind of Rotary peace discussion, but it strikes me that having worked in public diplomacy in a former life, I understand the language of war fighting very intimately. And while we talk about things like limited versus full-scale nuclear war and play out war game scenarios and entailing effects on the climate or populations, it's highly abstract and it's a difficult conversation for non-specialists to both engage and to be successful in with policymakers for a variety of historical reasons. My question is, within the kind of arc and the narrative you're telling, if peace is greater than the absence of is greater than simply the absence of war, is part of this story about the abolition of nuclear weapons made more compelling if we bring in the indigenous voices of communities who are facing ongoing nuclear wars? We can understand, identify the impact of Nagasaki and Hiroshima with the offensive use of nuclear weapons. But from atmospheric testing to the mining and production of uranium, to the effects on downwinders and to native communities, indigenous communities in the United States, in the South Pacific, very impactful in the Western United States here for us, in Hawaii, but places like, where the world powers have been manufacturing these weapons, that is an ongoing nuclear war and catastrophe to those populations. And would our conversation be more enriched, less seemingly political, and more consonant with other strategies about, environmental protection, indigenous rights, if framed in that way?
Could I speak to that? Kelly, I think you raised an incredibly important point. The suffering that people who've been exposed to radiation and other health effects from the nuclear weapons enterprise and continue to experience health problems from this exposure is a very compelling story, and it helps to put a human face on this message. I think it's important to understand, though, that it would be possible to address those health concerns and still do nothing to eliminate the nuclear weapons. So I think we have to, I think it enriches the conversation to bring in those issues, but it does not substitute for a real discussion of the need to get rid of these weapons.
There are groups that are working on this, and we collaborate with them on occasion. There is a group out of Nuclear Age Peace Foundation that's working with youth and people in New York City, and they are engaging the Marshallese. There are some groups on Fukushima that are drawing attention to the nuclear holocaust there that was not a nuclear weapon. So there are groups out there. The indigenous population is involved. We don't have anybody in our group, but we can certainly put them on stage to talk about the impact on them. I think it is a powerful, it has a big impact if we can listen to people who have experienced the nuclear catastrophe, even though we think of two nuclear detonations, but there were really more like 2,000. And just because they were done for testing does not reduce the impact of them and the continuing radiation and nuclear junk that's in their neighborhoods and the health impacts. I think if we can people with health impacts to act, yes, then my position would be that would be useful.
Steve, did
Kelly,
you have...
actually, yes, Kelly, there are immigrants from the Marshall Islands on the Big Island. And one of our projects, our club projects that we're working on is to support them. They have fled the islands because of the radiation. The Marshall Islands are not protected of the United States. They were used and destroyed, but there is no safety net for these people. So we're trying to help them. But it's getting to your point. We have survivors of the A-bomb or of the testing who are not the victims in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they're alive today. And by necessity are in need of help. So we are trying on that front as well. And Hawaii is another place where we can bring that to the attention of the war and our campaign for abolition. So you raised a great point, and we're trying to do something.
Can I ask Kelly? Kelly, I thought you were making 2 points. One was to bring in the people who were not direct victims of explosions to the nuclear madness that we've had over the last 75 years, but also that we need to emphasize the positive aspects of doing away with nuclear weapons and the impact it could have on negotiating peace in other difficulties and things like that. Was that also part of your point?
Sure. I mean, I'm, I've been in, like I said, my experience working in public diplomacy around when we talk about, the narrative around how we campaign for peace or campaign for political change. The language of warfighting is a really hard one to win against the non-military industrial establishment. And, I think I'm old enough to remember the nuclear freeze movement, of the 70s and 80s. And I, remember, living in Washington State in the shadow of, Bangor nuclear submarine base in Washington State. And the challenges of that narrative against the specialists and the technocrats. And so I think, thinking about the different tools and resources we could bring and being cautious not to engage, because they'll always have exceptions as to why the limited nuclear war scenario won't happen, or a broad-based nuclear weapons release won't happen because of command and control, and we lose. The basic argument about the testing and the mining and all the ongoing holocaust that is going on were essential to the production of those weapons and their maintenance, and they're not entirely separate issues. But to the point earlier, I think a both and, but being careful and strategic about the language we use so we don't surrender our power and our rightful place to make these arguments and be as equipped as we can to bring the best arguments to bear is important.
Kelly, one further comment on that. I think what we've found over the last decade in negotiating the TPNW is that the real key to that problem that you've addressed is to reframe this entire question so that it's not one of military strategy that we're talking about, but one of humanitarian impacts. If you start this conversation, talking about nuclear warfighting theory, you get one result. If you start the conversation by talking about what's going to happen if these weapons are actually used, you get a totally different conversation and a totally different outcome. And I think in many ways that was the situation back in the Freeze. In that campaign, although there's some difficulties debating, if you will, people from the military-industrial complex, we won that. We brought about enormous change in US and Soviet nuclear policy by talking directly about what was going to happen if there was a nuclear war and the absolute imperative of avoiding that. And I think it's the same situation today. If people understand what is going to happen if these weapons are used, then the only question is, how do we avoid that? Not how do we win a nuclear war, or how do we use nuclear weapons to get our way in the world? And we saw that, as I said recently, in the discussions around the TPNW, all of the diplomats involved thought that was the critical piece, that we just took control of the narrative and said, no, we're talking about what happens if nuclear war occurs. And it's up to you to figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen by getting rid of the weapons.
Kelly, this is Peter Metz again. I'd like to talk to you about your experience with diplomacy. How can you and I get together?
I'm on mute. I'll put my email in the chat.
That'd be great. Thank you.
There was somebody else who had a comment or raised his hand.
Helen, maybe you would like to address, I got a message from Naomi Masuno saying that someone who left the meeting left a message and said the divisive comments are painful to listen to. Eliminating weapons does not bring peace. Developing trust between countries brings peace. And I don't know who that is.
I'm not sure why you're giving me the honor of responding to that, but I would say that I am working for the end of war, the end of the use of war as a means of resolving conflict. I'm also a member of World Beyond War, and that is why they came into being in the first place. And so from my point of view, we need to recognize that culturally, we are living in cultures that accept war. And that is the only reason that we are still using war as a means of resolving conflict. There have been exhaustive studies done trying to correlate, why this war and that war. It's because culturally, we are still accepting the use of war. And so I totally agree. My personal mission is not to eliminate this weapon or that weapon or those sanctions. It's to turn around and look at the thinking behind the culture that is allowing this to continue and to address it directly. I believe that we need a shift in consciousness. We need a shift towards peace consciousness on our planet. I think that my agenda overlaps wonderfully with the agenda of eliminating nuclear weapons, because that's just a fantastic place to start this effort. And the strategies have already been developed by ICANN, so we know what we can be doing there. And I do believe that if we stand up and take a stand for that, that shift in consciousness will start. But yes, it's trust that will lead to peace. It's a change in our thinking culturally that will lead to peace.
I also agree with Helen as well. Like the base of all this is trust between nations, but I think eliminating nuclear weapons, what that does is that it eliminates the worst case scenario. Of course, trust is important, and of course, eliminating war is important. But if there is war, the worst possible thing that can happen is for there to be global nuclear war. And I think they're related categories, but they're somewhat separate in that eliminating nuclear weapons eliminates the possibility of the end of the world from a conflict. I mean, there's lots of other ways to do it too, of course, but one of the most obvious ways is nuclear weapons. I think that's one of the reasons why people are so concerned about it. But I do agree that the root cause is trust between nations. And actually, I work in public diplomacy too, so it's something that I understand.
I really agree with what Ray just said. I think that, and what Helen said as well, I think that the process of eliminating nuclear weapons will be an incredibly useful model for dealing with other problems that countries face. But I think we also have to understand there is a real urgency about eliminating nuclear weapons in it, that task in itself. We don't, any of us, believe there's going to be a nuclear war. And that's the problem, because if we don't take action to get rid of these weapons, there is going to be a nuclear war. And this denial is incredibly deep. I have it myself. I talk about nuclear war all the time. I know that there's going to be a nuclear war if we continue on the road that we're on, but I can't make myself believe it. When I look around, I just can't imagine the destruction that Ray described at Hiroshima taking place in my city, in every city that I know. But everything that the experts tell us is that if we don't take action, that is what's going to happen. And the experts were telling us it'd be a global pandemic for 40 years, and we didn't prepare for it. And we can't afford to make that mistake again with regards to nuclear weapons. So while the elimination of weapons will have further benefit in terms of helping us build a generally more peaceful world, it's an absolute necessity if we're going to survive to build that peaceful world. And the time frame that the experts give us is not very long. If we don't get this situation under control and get these weapons eliminated within a decade or so, we are going to be in a very, very dangerous situation. We're already in a dangerous situation now. And I don't mean to be so gloomy, but I think we really need to break through this denial. We have to understand that this is a matter of extraordinary urgency, just as we understood in the 1980s. I don't know what's different between then and now, but at that time, millions of people understood that if we didn't get rid of nuclear weapons, if we didn't end the Cold War arms race at least, the US and the Soviet Union were going to go to war. And they were right, and they took action. And the Cold War, we were able to bring the Cold War arms race to an end. We can get rid of these weapons today as well, but only if we really focus on doing that.
I would like to add a couple things for people who want to do something, even though you don't want to shift gears and be spending 10 hours a day on this, like some of us are. You can sign the Japanese Survivors Appeal. That helps us build support and be able to say, you can do this. You can start investing your investments and check your credit card and see if you're helping to make this a problem. So if you don't want to do the confrontational kind of thing of getting people to do things, you can do things yourself. And trust me that the more people that get rid of their Capital Ones and their other credit cards, the more they get the message. Right now, I'm in a retirement investment that I can't easily get out of without a tremendous sacrifice. What I'm doing is joining with the Teachers Credit Union, TIAA. The teachers are on their case to get rid of carbon and fossil fuels and so forth. So we just say, just add nuclear weapons because we want to be around to work on this campaign for the long haul. And so together we can make noise. I've been assured that TIAA has responded to its members in the past. And Green America is going to help us make this campaign and make it visible, because right now they are supporting climate efforts and getting rid of weapons, but they never say nuclear weapons. So we have agreed that we're going to start working on this, and we can bring Rotarians into this. So the link to the Japanese Survivors Appeal is in the chat.
I'm Bill Shaw. I would like to just go back to almost the very first comment of ERA. when he reflected upon making a presentation recently to a group of university students. I think raising the level of awareness that people have through education institutions, even at the elementary level, and that really is reflected on the teachers, and the teachers themselves have no awareness, have no consciousness about nuclear weapons. And I'm wondering whether the Rotary Club, Rotary International, has any effort or focus in this area. Are there any curriculum materials for teachers? It's so important to raise the level of awareness. And if it's not even in our education systems and the university level, I mean, really, this is such a huge area that needs attention, in my opinion.
Yeah, Bill, let me address that a little bit. One of the most prominent voices in Rotary for peace is Peter Kyle, who has just become a director of the Rotary International. And Peter and his collaborators have begun an education program uh, on the eastern seaboard that is going to educate, I believe, something like 50,000 high school students on peace and including the nuclear issue. So, Peter Kyle is one of those guys who, when he opens his mouth, he can have a lot of influence.
Yes.
And so his program on the eastern seaboard has already been taken up by some districts in California. It's already having an impact. The other thing that's going on right now is the Rotary Action Group for Peace has partnered with an organization called World Beyond War. And they are also doing a program in high schools and junior high schools internationally. So there is a program in India, there's a program in Latin America, there's a program in Africa, and the same thing. They are developing a peace curriculum that addresses, peace in general, but also the specific topics of, nuclear weapons and the whole Rotary framework of peace. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and Peter Kyle put it very well. The very best way to promote peace in the world for Rotary is education of youth. So yeah, there's a lot happening, especially right now.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that, Mark?
Yeah, sure.
Well, two things actually, because I'm a member of World Beyond War as well, and I'm very active in the partnership between Rotary Action Group for Peace and World Beyond War. And Canada is one of the participating countries, and it's a phenomenal effort because it's not just encouraging the kids to do positive peace building; it's also giving them the opportunity to understand more why we still have war and what they can do about it. And the other comment I wanted to add is that. And, Dave and I have my husband and I have just come back from a little rest and relaxation. And we went to Palm Springs, of all places. I've never been before. And we were there on Remembrance Day. Now, this is a Canadian viewpoint here on Remembrance Day in the US, but Dave was literally worried for me because I was getting really concerned. Don't think that our kids aren't learning something, because the Remembrance Day parade was unbelievable, an unbelievable glorification of war. There were jets from World War I flying overhead, and the kids were all excited, and it was so cool. And there were these fantastic floats and celebrations, and they were even cheering the Gold Star families. They've lost a loved one, and they're sort of being cheered in this parade. And then there's little kids marching, and then there's middle school kids marching, and then there's high school kids marching. And by now in high school, they have some kind of uniform on. I just found the whole thing, to me, it was just a glorification of war. And most of the people participating were unconscious of what they were doing.
Yes. Thank you. I agree.
Well, on that note,
Yeah. If there are no more questions, why don't we end here? And I want to thank you all for coming. Great presentations. The original presentation by the We Rotary Club is up on the District 5000 website. What I'll probably do once I get this recording is take that one down and put this one up, because Helen has updated her PowerPoint with the results of the most recent Council on Legislation. So I'll put this one up and it'll be available to all the Rotarians in the district. And I put the link in the chat so you can get it there. But yes, thank you again. And thank you all the members of We Rotary. This was an awesome presentation. I'm glad we did it again. And thanks everyone for coming once again.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Take
thank you,
care.
Thank you.
Mark.